Before I start this story, please take a second to subscribe, not just for me, but for every parent who's ever fought for their child's life. Your support means everything. Because what I'm about to tell you is one of the hardest battles I've ever faced. A battle not just against illness, but against pure selfishness. And it all started with one woman, our HOA Karen. It was a bright Saturday morning, the kind that's supposed to feel peaceful. But peace was something my family hadn't known in a long time. My son, Ethan, had been battling a rare condition since birth. After months of waiting, we finally got the call. The hospital was ready for his operation. My wife cried tears of relief, and I could finally breathe again. But our happiness didn't last long. You see, we live in an HOA neighborhood, and if you've ever dealt with one, you already know how controlling some people can be. In our case, it was one particular woman, Karen, the self-proclaimed guardian of neighborhood rules. She was the kind who measured grass height and left notes about trash cans being out too long. But this time, her obsession went beyond rules. It turned dangerous. The day before the operation, medical technicians came to our home to set up a portable oxygen and monitoring system for Ethan. It was temporary, just to help stabilize him before surgery. The setup was small and placed in our front yard because it needed good airflow. The techs told us it was completely safe and necessary. We were grateful, but Karen wasn't. That afternoon, she came storming toward us with her phone in hand, recording everything like she was some kind of HOA cop. "This equipment violates HOA Code 4B. No exterior medical devices or unsightly machinery," she shouted. I tried to explain that it was for my son, but she wouldn't listen. She said it was ruining the neighborhood's aesthetic. I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. My wife begged her to understand, tears running down her face. "Karen, please, this is for Ethan. He needs this to breathe." But Karen just crossed her arms and said, "If everyone broke the rules for sympathy, we'd have chaos." That moment broke something inside me. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just turned away, focused on my boy, and prayed this woman would find some humanity in her heart. The next morning, the day of the surgery, we woke up early to get Ethan ready. But when I stepped outside, my heart stopped. The medical equipment was gone. The oxygen monitor, the support tubes, everything. My first thought was that someone had stolen it, but then I noticed the faint drag marks on the driveway leading toward Karen's house. Panic hit me like a truck. My wife ran inside to check on Ethan. He was struggling to breathe. I grabbed my phone and sprinted to Karen's yard. And there it was. The equipment was sitting behind her trash bins, completely unplugged. She stood on her porch, coffee in hand, and said, "You're welcome. I called the HOA last night. You had no permission for this mess." I swear, I've never been so close to losing control. I told her she could have killed my son, but she just rolled her eyes and said, "Don't be dramatic." That's when the paramedics arrived. I had already called 911. They rushed in, checked Ethan's vitals, and immediately called for an emergency ambulance to the hospital. One of the techs muttered under his breath, "Who would do something like this?" At the hospital, the doctors managed to stabilize Ethan. They said if we had been 5 minutes later, things could have ended very differently. My wife broke down completely. When the doctor heard what had happened, his face turned pale. He looked right at me and said, "That woman committed a serious offense. We're calling the police." Later that afternoon, an officer came to the hospital to take my statement. I showed him the security footage from our doorbell camera. It clearly showed Karen sneaking into our yard around midnight, disconnecting the cables, and dragging the devices away. The officer shook his head and said, "This isn't just a violation of HOA rules. This is tampering with medical equipment, a criminal act." When the police arrived at Karen's house, she apparently tried to argue her way out of it. She said she didn't realize it was life support equipment, and that she was just enforcing the rules. But the officers weren't buying it. They confiscated her phone and took her statement. Meanwhile, news started spreading around the neighborhood, and everyone was stunned. A few of our neighbors, the same ones who used to agree with Karen, came to the hospital with flowers and apologies. They said they never knew how cruel she could be. Some even called for her removal from the HOA board. But honestly, I didn't care about the politics anymore. All I wanted was for my son to recover. 2 days later, Ethan's surgery was a success. The doctor said he was a fighter, and for the first time in months, I saw him smile. But even then, part of me couldn't forget how close we came to losing him, not because of his illness, but because of someone's pride and ignorance. A week later, Karen was officially charged with reckless endangerment and interference with medical equipment. When the police came back to question us for final details, one of the officers told me something that made my heart sink. Karen had told them, "Rules are rules. If I start making exceptions, where does it end?" Can you imagine? She almost killed a child, and still thought she was right. When we finally returned home, the neighborhood felt different. People avoided Karen's house. The HOA quietly removed her from her position. And for the first time in years, the community started acting human again. Sometimes tragedy has a way of exposing what's real and what's rotten. I still think about that night sometimes, the panic, the fear, the anger. But I also remember the kindness that followed. The neighbors who stepped up. The doctors who saved Ethan. The police who took us seriously. It reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there's still good in the world. You just have to hold on to it. And to anyone out there dealing with an HOA bully, a toxic neighbor, or someone who thinks rules matter more than lives, stand your ground. Protect your family. Because no one, and I mean no one, has the right to play God with someone else's life. When we finally returned home, the neighborhood felt different. People avoided Karen's house. The HOA quietly removed her from her position. And for the first time in years, the community started acting human again. Sometimes tragedy has a way of exposing what's real and what's rotten. I still think about that night sometimes, the panic, the fear, the anger. But I also remember the kindness that followed. The neighbors who stepped up. The doctors who saved Ethan. The police who took us seriously. It reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there's still good in the world. You just have to hold on to it. And to anyone out there dealing with an HOA bully, a toxic neighbor, or someone who thinks rules matter more than lives, stand your ground. Protect your family. Because no one, and I mean no one, has the right to play God with someone else's life.